Before the trumpet, cornets were more commonly used in orchestral music. By the late 1800s, however, people were getting tired of it. French composer Hector Berlioz remarked that a phrase that would appear tolerable when performed by violins or the woodwind becomes flat and intolerably vulgar when emphasized by the incisive, brash, and impudent sound of the cornet. By 1900s, the company Besson invented the B-flat trumpet, which differed from earlier trumpets by including valves. Older trumpets did not have these valves, causing brass players in orchestras to have multiple types of trumpets for one performance, each set in different keys. Valved trumpets made it much easier for people to play by enabling trumpet players to switch keys by changing the length of the tube.
Okay, so as you can see here, the old trumpet, it's called the natural trumpet here. It doesn't have any of like these little knobbly things that the valve trumpet has. So people literally had to like swap out their trumpet when they were playing for like a single piece. So obviously, yeah, like the valve trumpet made it a lot easier. We actually, unfortunately, weren't able to find a trumpet, but we do have a clarinet, which has like a similar layout. And it, as you can see, it still has those valves right here. Because of this addition, the Besson trumpet began replacing cornets in orchestras. For example, when the Chicago Symphony Orchestra was founded, it had 2 trumpets and 2 cornets, but they were all described by trumpets by the end of the decade. So obviously people wanted to make things easier by switching to the valved instrument as opposed to the unvalved.
Military bands originally consisted of fifes or woodwinds and snare drums. This changed in the 1850s with the introduction of the valve and brass instruments. Now, military bands were mainly used to send signals and commands across the battlefield as well as to entertain the troops. But with the valve, brass instruments became the ideal instrument to use in military bands. With the valve, it made it easier to adjust the pitch of notes by adjusting the length of the tubing, and it made brass instruments much more flexible, allowing musicians to hit notes unreachable by other instruments. Now, 2 brass instruments were primarily used in military bands, those being the saxhorn and the cornet. The saxhorn was important because if you look here, it has this large open bell at the front, and it would be played with that bell facing behind the players. Now, military bands would march in front of the troops so that when they sent signals, they could send them behind them into all the troops marching with them. The saxhorn was very important because of its long reach and its ability to send signals and commands far beyond into the army.
So when talking about brass and pop music in the 1900s, so in 1900, jazz performance style changed forever as brass bands thrived in churches and pleasure clubs. And in the mid 19th century, brass bands such as opera overtures, martial music, folk songs, and pop melodies started to erupt in New Orleans. Someone from New Orleans who revolutionized jazz in the 1920s was Louis Armstrong. He was dominant in the swing era, and many trumpeteers actually attempted to emulate his structure, melody, and technical virtuosity. He played a custom-made and inscribed 1946 Henry Selmer B-flat trumpet. His trumpet has a circular pinky ring for the 4th finger underneath its 3rd valve, and the forward placement of the main 3 valves bring them away from the mouthpiece and closer to the bell. By the 1940s, the triumph of the trumpet over the cornet was sealed, as the trumpet became the leading brass instrument in pop music and jazz. The cornet has a more rich and rounded sound, as opposed to the trumpet's more powerful sound. The cornet has a conical bore shape, as the trumpet has a more cylindrical bore shape. So those are the differences between the cornet and the trumpet there.